to Behind the Ballot, where politics meets real life. We break down state and federal issues, showing how policy shapes everyday Americans. Engaged, balanced, and informative. That's our promise. I'm your host, Mikkel Jenkins.
And this is Muhammad Alec as well, chiming in. Mikhail, I'm excited to join. We a little bit of a back-to-back episode, a little bit unusual, but there's always something going on. There was a lot that we didn't get to touch on as well on the Tuesday episode, so I'm excited to break down into that more.
Yeah, definitely a lot that has been going on from our last episode. Definitely some more updates, obviously, as there is every day with the U.S. Iran war, as well as a SOS letter sent by Zelensky regarding the Russia conflict. And then we will move to the domestic side of things, looking at Texas and looking at JD Vance and Stephen Miller on fraud as well with a few other topics, and then ending as we have now been normally doing with our miscellaneous section as well. So we are going to get right into it, starting with the Middle East. President Trump held a significant cabinet meeting today amid ongoing negotiations to end the conflict with Iran. And he was actually, there was some footage of him actually sleeping during that cabinet meeting when Marco Rubio was talking. And actually, there
He
was
likes his naps. He really likes
yeah, he
his
likes his
naps.
naps. And there's actually a MSN actually put together a montage of him sleeping from Memorial Day to this cabinet meeting. However, Trump has expressed strong doubts about finalizing any deal unless Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other key players join the Abraham Accords, which is the normalization agreement
With
with
Israel.
Israel. Yeah, that the UAE and Bahrain already belong to. He bluntly stated these countries owe it to us and tied broader regional peace to any Iran agreement, framing it as a part of a larger push that could even involve regime change dynamics. And he actually stated this during that cabinet meeting that this is regime change, even though there were months and weeks of Rubio and Vance speaking out and stating that this isn't about regime change at all, even though you heard it from his mouth today that this is about regime change. Trump highlighted Iran's severely weakened military position. He even posted on Truth Social a AI generated image of Iranian ships at the bottom of the sea, which is obviously completely false. As we know and as we've reported, that Iran is still strategically well off militarily in the terms of vessels and missiles as well. And this is what the U.S. officials, military officials, are stating. So, with all of this going on, the Air Force and the Navy are still keeping up with their blockade, even though that is a piece of this memorandum of understanding that was talked about yesterday as well, earlier today as well, this morning, on to the Strait of Hormuz. Trump pushed for it to be reopened immediately to everyone as international waters under U.S. oversight with nobody holding sole control. We all know that that is not going to be the case. And Iran has pushed back hard through state media and sources close to the preliminaries speaker's office, and insisting on permanent sovereign control and environmental protection fees. That is the new phrasing that on tolls for the Strait of Hormuz that they are going to be implementing and that they have been implementing ever since midway through the beginning of this war. And it also would include a full withdrawal of U.S. forces from the area and restoration of commercial transit to pre-war levels within 30 days. Iran also demands the immediate release of about 12 billion in frozen funds as a tangible verification step. No nuclear commitments or uranium handover would be likely, as we've all talked about. And there would be a prohibition on hostile countries to basically going against vessels, as well as protecting Gulf states from any other Israeli or United States attack. And this is going to be a final binding UN Security security resolution within 60 days. So we will see what comes up from this. But the White House has rejected key parts of Iran's proposed memorandum, calling these claims fabrications, basically, and insist on nuclear concessions first, which Iran is not going to go forward with. That is literally the main thing that they have stated they will not allow before any peace negotiations are even moved forward in any good faith. But however, this remains fluid with no deal signed. But we will see what comes tomorrow morning with any news from this deal, as well as what Iran has to say about whatever the U.S. puts out regarding this deal.
I mean, I think it's funny to see that on both ends.
Mom, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think it's funny to see on both
Yeah,
ends the media of both countries rejects what the other country is saying. As Iran will say what the United States is
literally.
reporting is completely false. The United States will say whatever Iran is reporting is completely false. And I really want to see if there's an actual agreement they come to. I'm not optimistic though. I'm not.
No, I'm not optimistic at all that there's going to be one. Not at all. I mean, as we stated yesterday, I mean, the main sticking point being the enrichment in uranium. I mean, if they don't drop that, this is never going to end. With the back and forth over accepting and rejecting peace deals and or memorandums of understanding, it's just not going to happen. So until we get over that hump and at least frame the deal in a way that is somewhat replicated of Obama's deal, where it capped them at that 3.6 or 3.7%. I think just capping them at a percentage is going to be strategically better to just end this war and try to get everything back to pre-war levels, because you have I was listening to the news today, and there was a reporter was speaking that we wouldn't get back to $3 gas, $2.90 gas until like 2036, just given how everything has been blocked up from the blockade and with this war, which is pretty damning to hear. But hopefully that is not the case in reality. Like realistically, I hope it is quicker than 2038 or 2036 for us to get back to pre-war levels in terms of energy, oil, and the key prices that are really hurting Americans. But that very well could be the case. And now we're going to be shifting to Ukraine. President Zelensky sent a urgent letter to President Trump and Congress warning of critical shortages in air defense, particularly the Patriot PAC-3 interceptors needed against Russian ballistic missiles. After recent massive Russian attacks involving dozens of missiles and hundreds of drones, Zelensky stressed that Ukraine relies almost exclusively on the U.S. for ballistic missile defense. He praised American systems like the F-16s and the HIMARS, the HIMARS, which is proposed purchasing more Patriots and exploring joint production, and argued that stronger Ukrainian defenses would support U.S. diplomatic goals while noting global supply strains from other conflicts like Iran. Ukraine officials emphasized the need for swift action to prevent vulnerabilities. So we'll see if the United States will ram up any military efforts with Ukraine in terms of providing them with more arms. As we know, we pulled back a lot of our military capabilities from a lot of our allies when this war started. Ukraine, Japan, South Korea, all of these individuals saw our defenses retracted and primarily focused on Israel. So I really don't expect the United States to provide really any additional support to Ukraine as this war is continuously ramming on, and there seems to be no deal really in sight to end it. What do you think, Mohammed?
I mean, I think that I really don't see this situation, both neither the Ukraine nor Iranian situation, coming to a close without some kind of actual satisfaction on both ends. I mean, that's the thing when it comes to these military situations, is these countries both want to come out with what they can consider a win for their people. With Ukraine, it's Russia getting the territory
Yeah.
grab of Crimea and more to have access to the Black Sea. With Iran, it's basically having the U.S. back off and keeping its nuclear powers and energy as it wants it more. So I think that we'll see what happens, and I think this is likely going to turn into a Cold War at this rate, similar to how we had with Afghanistan, the Ukrainian situation. But
Yeah.
this is actually kind of funny, and I want to bring it up. When I was on vacation in Florida, I had a Ukrainian Lyft driver, and I asked him, I was like, "How'd you get to America? Why'd you leave Ukraine?" He was like, "Oh, I didn't want to get conscripted by like the forces." Because they like forcibly conscript
Wow.
young men into the military to fight the war. So I really do
Wow.
think that this is just going to be a matter of attrition on the Russian end of things because Ukraine's really losing the morale side of things, and I think that I'm more I see more clear ending to the Ukraine war than I do to the Iran war. 100%. That's like really my end thoughts on the comparison of the two.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that too. I mean, the back and forth and just, what's a deal, what's not a deal, what's accepted, what's rejected is just baffling. Because there's really no path in sight for a deal. Well, should I say a effective deal to be in place to end this war, where both sides come out on top, or basically they win. One side is going to have to give up concessions, and it's seeming like it's unfortunately going to have to be the United States to give up concessions, even though Donald Trump is not going to let that happen by any means, and Israel will not let that happen by any means at all. But on the global health front, so I know we were covering hantavirus for a while, for maybe about 2 or 3 episodes, but now there is a serious Ebola outbreak involving the rare, I'm going to botch this, the Bundigo strain, which is escalating in Central Africa, centered in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the conflict ridden, it's 3 various provinces, but has a little bit of spillover into Uganda. The WHO has declared it a public health emergency of international concern. And as of late May, there are over 900 suspected cases and more than 230 deaths reported. Challenges include ongoing armed conflicts disrupting response efforts, mass displacement into overcrowded camps, weak health infrastructure, poor roads, and the fact that this strain has no approved vaccines or specific treatments, relying instead on supportive care like IV fluids. WHO Director um, Tedros, I want to say that's how you say that, warned of a catastrophic collision of disease and war, calling for immediate ceasefires for humanitarian access. The U.S. is planning to actually send exposed Americans to a specialized facility in Kenya, while travel restrictions may have been imposed by several countries, including the U.S., Canada, and the Bahamas. Risk to Americans remains relatively low overall, as the risk spreads through bodily fluids of symptomatic people, but experts note public health funding cuts could complicate future responses. And that's why I truly believe we are sending these individuals over to another country to have to get looked at by these Ebola outbreak, because if we, don't forget, Dodge and Donald Trump cut a lot of the key functions at the CDC, and especially with RFK on the health side of things, we've seen a lot of staffers leave that area. So that's why we don't have the capability to unfortunately diagnose with this Ebola outbreak. But hopefully this can be contained. And, especially with the World Cup right around the corner, with the hantavirus and this outbreak spreading rapidly as well, this can really set up a brutal global health disaster if it is not caught and contained correctly and strategically. And hopefully, I know the United States is not a part of the World Health Organization, but hopefully we will be in some parts of the solution for this new Ebola strain, as well as the hantavirus. Because I can tell you now, I do not want to go through another set of lockdowns and shutdowns for this country. Muhammad, what do you think?
I mean, Ebola's been around for a decent bit of time, but coronavirus as well had its own, had a lot of strains that came out before COVID-19 really hit the world. They, I think I can speak for everyone when I say no one really wants another outbreak or epidemic or pandemic, I should say, to occur again, considering everything that happened.
No.
I'm really optimistic that it won't spread. Because I mean, if we did, if this happens at the same time as the Iran war, at the same time as the shortage that's slowly occurring, it would be such a giant rock to the economy and to and just the global way of life that
Yeah.
I, I don't want to even think about having to deal with it. I don't want to think about the repercussions. Everyone having to go back inside and get locked down, while ideally does not happen. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely no one wants these lockdowns to restart back up. And we obviously hope that both of these viruses are contained to where, the deaths continue to stay low. I know the Ebola virus is spreading rapidly, but hopefully the World Health Organization, and with the assistance of the United States and its allies, before things get severely out of hand. And now we're going to be moving to the domestic side of things, looking at primary shakeups and the anti-fraud push. So yesterday in Texas, a major development and the Trump revenge tour. So Trump endorsed Attorney General Ken Paxton decisively defeated incumbent Senator John Cryan and the GOP Senate primary runoff, winning roughly 64 to 36% of the vote. This marks a significant victory for Trump's influence and a blow to more establishment Republicans. Crine was the first Texas GOP senator in decades to lose renomination. Paxton will now face Democrat James Tallarico in November. And it's important to note that yes, Trump can tout um that that he's doing so great, and elections and so forth for getting his candidates elected, but it's only on the primary stage that he has these wins. On the general election stage, he's actually 0-13 when going up against Democrats, and hopefully it is 0-14 with this general election race between Paxton and Tallarico in November, which I think is definitely going to be the case. Tallarico came out with some great ads right after the vote was basically final in Paxton's favor, basically saying he's going to go on a tour throughout Texas, basically calling it the people versus Paxton, which is a great way to frame it. But it's important to note that Cryan, the shot in his foot was basically stating that Republicans could have done better than Donald Trump. And Cryan's saving grace was his tweet basically stating that the SAVE Act is important and needs to basically pass, even though the SAVE Act is something that has not even been taken up for an official vote. So just to see that small level of loyalty that Trump was able to remember, as if he was like an elephant, as they remember everything. He held that grudge, and this led to Cryan's win. Cryan's unfortunate defeat as being the establishment Republican, and Paxton ended up winning. And we're going to dive into his legal challenges, because this shouldn't surprise anybody that Donald Trump would put his unwavering support around an individual like this. So Paxton's path to this primary was when comes despite a long history of legal controversies that have defined much of his time in office. The most high profile was his 2023 impeachment by the Texas House of Representatives on May 27, 2023. The House approved 20 articles of impeachment, focusing heavily on allegations that Paxton abused his official powers to benefit a political donor and friend boyfriend, Austin real estate developer Nate Paul. Key accusations included bribery, corruption, obstruction of justice, and using his office to help Paul in personal legal matters. There were also claims tied to an alleged extramarital affair with a woman employed by Paul. The Texas Senate held a historic trial in September 2023, the first impeachment trial of a statewide official in nearly 50 years. Paxton was acquitted on all 16 articles brought to a vote, of course, largely along party lines, failing short of the two-thirds majority needed for conviction. He was immediately reinstated, and Paxton called the process a sham orchestrated by political enemies. And funny enough, who does that sound almost exactly like? Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And separately, Paxton has faced a long running securities and fraud indictment charges dating back to 2015, as well as another major issue involving whistleblower retaliation in 2020. And these charges just keep piling up left and right. And Paxton has also faced an FBI investigation into similar corruption allegations. A Texas state bar disciplinary suits over his post 2020 election lawsuit, which he was claiming widespread fraud. That's when all these Republicans were throwing up these fraud allegations left and right that are being shot down, as well as ongoing criticism for his hardline conservative legal actions. Supporters view these as politically motivated attacks from the establishment and Biden era DOJ, while critics argue they raise serious questions about fitness for higher office like the US Senate. These issues are expected to be central in the November matchup against Tallarico, who has already begun highlighting Paxton's record. And it's just really sad to see that the electorate was so easily swung by Trump's late endorsement of Paxton that he was able to win in such a large margin when you had the GOP establishment and even John Thune effectively full backing of Crine in his candidacy. And, they are pissed that this is another failure of the establishment now losing to a Trump candidate, and Trump is once again pushing on with his revenge tour, as we were talking about. I mean, he's going to be targeting Murkowski. Collins, Susan Collins is already looking at a very, very tight race. I mean, Grant Plattner is at least, I think, 10 points up on her right now. He's now going after Brian Fitzpatrick as he has put out legislation to curtail and put in restrictions regarding this nonsensical $1.8 billion slush fund. You have Bill Cassidy, who lost his most recent primary race to a MAGA endorsed conservative, if you want to say. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene, you have Massie, you have all of these individuals, excluding Taylor Greene since she's not in Congress anymore. But you have all these individuals that now have no allegiance towards Trump. So effectively, Trump is making himself his own lame duck in the Senate, as the House is already geared up and primed for the Democrats to take. And this is going to hurt him on a lot of his legislative ask as the House and Senate look to come back next week. And it's going to be a lot to see as they take up reconciliation, as well as a lot of these other measures that Donald Trump has been trying to shove down their throats, especially the SAVE Act, which is something that saved Paxton's butts from getting this endorsement. But the legislative schedule next week will be interesting. We will definitely be bringing you some very deep insights on what's going on.
And I want to add to
Now we're
this
going to be moving
that
to
when
the
the
yeah.
initial
Mhm.
when the initial primary ended, it was literally like for Paxton the Corn, it was like a 2% difference. So to see it be as large as it is now is actually, in my opinion, pretty surprising because Trump's endorsed Paxton during the normal primary, I believe, and then all of a sudden you got such a large difference. I'm not sure if it was just time or if I'm mistaken when I remember Trump's endorsement on Paxton. But it was to me just still surprising how large that variance went from Paxton to Corn and how much the Republicans of Texas went. But there's one thing I want to note that
Yeah.
while a lot of Trump
It's the boomers,
endorsed,
man.
yeah, when a lot of Trump endorsed candidates have won their primaries, they do very poorly in the actual election because Trump endorsed candidates generally, heck, you attach Trump
Oh
to a
yeah,
name, it's pretty extreme, you know.
do horrible in the general.
Yeah.
Yeah, do horrible in the general
I
election.
mean,
And
look at the
during
Mickey
his cabinet
Cheryl.
meeting, he was like, I
Who's her
don't care,
opponent? Mickey Cheryl. You know this better than I do.
Mikey Sherrill.
Yeah. Thank you for correcting me.
Mikey Sherrill and Jack Chiarelli. Yeah, it's the same exact thing.
Yeah, yeah.
He
Like
tied himself so close
won the
to Trump and
primary, was a well
lost,
liked guy in the
lost
state,
in very high.
but at the end of the day, yeah, that Trump
Yeah,
endorsement,
yeah,
like,
was a very well liked guy, businessman.
yeah,
Yeah, pretty much, basically. And as I was saying, he's Donald Trump is 0-13 when it comes to the general elections, and he's fared pretty well when it comes to primary elections. Obviously, Cassidy and Massie now crying, both losing their races, and then we have Collins, Murkowski, who are going to be some tight races, and then Brian Fitzpatrick, and Pennsylvania as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the Senate will begin to interact with Donald Trump after all of these races. Well, since all these races are now over and they come back next week, as well as what their appetite is going to be with the House. As we know, the Senate has been the only body to actually get things thoroughly done ever since the big beautiful bill was passed. And on the fraud front, Vice President J.D. Vance continues leading the administration's anti-fraud task force, spotlighting massive welfare and Medicaid fraud that he says is so extensive it could help address the federal deficit, which I think is a uh, Republicans' favorite talking point now, ever since Dodge was a thing. They want to say all of this fraud in America will be the key of freeing us from the deficits and from our $1 trillion in debt. Mind you, 27% of that has come from Donald Trump's first presidency and his current presidency now. But in recent events, Vance emphasized protecting programs for vulnerable Americans while cracking down on waste and abuse, including cases involving sham providers and ineligible claims, which I think is very, very suitable to investigate and go after. I believe individuals that are providing care to the elderly but actually don't provide that care should be looked into and arrested, or whatever the repercussions would be. However, there was controversy around a recent White House fraud meeting where some Democratic state attorney generals felt excluded or had staff denied access after declining personal invitations due to short notice. And on a separate front, still on fraud, the DOJ's actions include subpoenas for Fulton County, Georgia, poll workers as part of the expansion of the 2020 election fraud related inquiries. And this is something that we've talked about regarding the election and fraud. So this is just another next step from that first initial FBI raid of Fulton County when Tulsi Gabbard was the DNI at the time. But yes, all of this fraud that's going on the Medicare side definitely needs to be looked into. But I think to basically state that this is going to be something that gets us out of the deficit is a long shot, because I'm pretty sure that's what Dodge was supposed to be. But instead, Dodge just got access to millions of Americans' Social Security information, and there still has been no transparency on that whatsoever. So, and they haven't even looked at fraud that particularly comes from, let's just say, like an area like in New Jersey, Lakewood, which is a heavily Jewish population, where there have been multiple reports. Even Nick Shirley, I believe, was an individual that even reported on the massive levels of welfare fraud that happens within that state. But then you have Vance just on almost constantly stating it's Somalis or some other ethnic group that is committing this levels of fraud. But we will see what comes from this investigation, and really what is the findings from all of this fraud, and actually how much money they get, because they tried with Dodge and it was a complete and utter failure. So we will see what comes from this. And on top of all of this, law enforcement is ramming up domestic threats with the FBI classifying certain violent anti AI, anti tech, and data center protests as forms of extremisms amid concerns over infrastructure attacks and civil unrest tied to job displacement fears. So now they're going to start ramming up all of their domestic surveillance techniques that they have for individuals that are now speaking out on AI data centers. And it's kind of insane because I feel like this is very fast moving on law enforcement, as it's only really within this year we've truly heard of the data centers being propped up left and right, and the increasingness of protest at all of these centers and or at various legislative houses and or chambers where these votes are being taken. But it's just sad to see that law enforcement is taking this route because there is a true fear of AI job place displacement, and as well as there is continued fear of continuation of fraud with Medicare and other various industries as well, because that is something that does harm America. But to basically blame it on a small subset of people when it is basically across the board is not the right way to go about it, and just the Republican way to go about it, as they always like to point at fraud and waste and abuse as being from other ethnic groups and not from the Jewish white American population, where some of that fraud does take place. Muhammad, what do you have on that section? Okay, we're going to go to the miscellaneous section. Just in other news, journalist Alyssa Valdez Rodriguez, who has done extensive investigative reporting on Jeffrey Epstein's New Mexico Zorro Ranch, says she is fleeing the United States after alleged attacks at her home, including incidents she describes as direct energy weapons and causing Havana syndrome like symptoms. She has moved into safe houses and plans to leave the country permanently, linking the harassment to her Epstein coverage. This is absolutely wild to hear that a journalist is wanting to leave the United States because they feel like they are being attacked for their investigative journalism on the Epstein ranch. And it also kind of feeds into the conspiracy theory that the government does not want there to be any further investigation into Epstein files and or this ranch, because that ranch can very well hold additional evidence that can play into these files, and that is the one thing that Americans want. That is the one thing that unfortunately got Thomas Massie removed from his seat, is the wanting of these files and this level of transparency from a administration that always talked about how they wanted to be so transparent, but they don't even want to allow for these files to be released, even though they ran on it so hard and told the American people on it. And finally, we have that President Trump is set to attend a Knicks game, keeping up with his tradition of high profile appearances. And basically, I plan to obviously watch all of this Knicks game and the series itself. Definitely looking forward to see how the Knicks do, and hopefully they are able to pull it out against the Spurs or OKC, depending upon who it eventually is. But yeah, I imagine he's going to get heckled very harshly. Everyone's loving Mondami and what he's doing. He's doing a plus 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 record in New York right now, especially with the Knicks on a historical run, and hopefully they are able to bring it home. And we will see what comes from Trump attending the next game, and we will see if individuals will be heckling him left and right, as they have started to, as he's made his public appearances at various places outside of the UFC. But that is the latest heading into the rest of the week. We've got geopolitics, elections, and accountability all moving forward. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on Behind the Ballot, where we keep politics engaged, balanced, and informative. To our listeners, stay curious, stay critical, and stay involved. I'm Mikhail Jenkins. And until next time, keep looking beyond the headlines and stay behind the ballot. Thank you.